My name is Leire Reguero. I'm going to talk about the journalistic credibility in Spain because such in these days, since 2015, Spanish journalism has been going through a crisis of credibility and trust in the new traditional media. Due to the evolution of technology and social interactions, social networks firstly, which allows the public to contribute to the construction of the news story. This crisis of disinformation in Spain is an issue that has crossed our borders. For example, in 2015, the New York Times carried out an analysis of the journalistic situation in Spain, in which it ruled that our press suffers from a lack of independence or freedom or information. In that article, the American newspaper also talked about the case of the dismissal of Pedro J. Ramírez, in that moment the director of the newspaper El Mundo, alluding to the information such as the SMS sent by Mariano Rajoy, in that moment president of the Spanish government, to Bárcenas to show his support. Also, this report alludes to government control over public radio and television, explaining how Rajoy changed the law to allow him to appoint the new president of RTV, Radio Televisión Spanish, without the need for conscience with other parties, and reports on several cases in which Spain's public media silenced information that was damaging to the government. Throughout the report, the New York Times covers the deontological problems reported in the editorial office at the newspaper El País. It also mentions how Antonio Caño, in that moment, was editor-in-chief of El País, blocked an attempt by the editorial team to hold the deliberation of his leadership in the newspaper, in the editor of the newspaper. Another accusation was made by New York Times was that the criticism by journalists of changes or the removal of facts on data affecting Qatar or Telefónica, in which the Prisa Media Group, which is the publisher of El País, has economic interests. Another article that affected the credibility of the Spanish journalists was one in 2015 also that was carried out by the University of Oxford, in which the English Center of Studies think that started the Spanish media were the least credible in Europe and the second most liar in the world. But today, in these days, if all of us go to the social network and we can find the screenshot of the leading of this information, but this information is false, because first of all, the information provided by the article is based on a report from 6 years ago and not on the most current one that it was in 2020, in which Spain is above 8 other European countries in the trustworthiness of the news and in second place among the 5 large European countries. Also, the study carried out does not assist public trust in the media or in journalists, but is in news in general. The false information disseminated especially mentions the credibility of the media that Spanish citizens regularly consult. However, the reality is that these data refer to the credibility of the news that one consumes. In this section, the confidence of Spaniards rises to 45%, surprising other European countries such as Italy or France, but however, it's once again below the average for the countries surveyed, that is 46%. On the other hand, Spaniards show a similar credibility to their average 32% when you ask about their trust in the news they find when searching for information. And a similar credibility to the average 23% versus 22% when it comes to news that we find on social networks. However, the current crisis in journalist credibility in Spain stems from the rise of social networks and fake news. Digital News report in 2022 stated that more than 50% of people under 25 get their news from TikTok and 4% of the podcast. However, a survey carried out that the ABC newspaper in 2021 shows that 77.6% of the Spanish population still trust and prefer television, radio, and the press for information because they have journalists who contrast and cross-check the news. The Spanish population's fear and concern about the spread of fake news has led to a debate on whether or not people agree the information professionals are the best guarantee against hoaxes. Today, also due to the fact that Spain is a fairly old country, most citizens still believe that the most truthful, reliable, and contrasted information is provided by radio, public television, and the press, with percentage of around 88%. Meanwhile, social networks and video sharing platforms have a percentage of around 8%. In reference to the before mentioned, due to the large number of people over 65 years of age, we could say that Spain is a country that continues to rely on traditional media and support those who are truly dedicated to the journalist profession and condemning the information which is mostly hoaxes on social networks. Taking advantage of the issues of social networks, Spanish parents are concerned about the corrupt consumption of information by their children on social networks, since in Spain it is still necessary to control the content of the content, television, and to extend the protection of minors to the internet. It is also necessary to include a message warning about the risk of dependence and addiction, just as the Spanish television channels warn about the recommended ages. On the other hand, there is a desire that influencers and YouTubers, generally intrusive people in Spain in the journalistic profession, comply with the law on advertising and the protection of minors, as do all other media. Also, almost the vast majority of Spanish society is calling on the government to impose the same controls and sanctions on social networks and different online platforms regarding content and advertising as it applies to free-to-air television. Returning to the starting point, according to the information provided by the European Union Eurobarometer of the previous year on media and news monitoring, the press appears in 5th place as the medium that Spaniards have access for information below television, digital media, radio, and blogs. However, with 44% as the most reliable and credible media, the press is in 2nd place ahead of networks and social media, but behind radio and television. However, traditional media are clear, but if we are looking for a higher quality of content. As Lidia Sanz, General Director of the Spanish Association of Advertisers, also stated that print media, not only in Spanish media, but worldwide, have been in decline for many years, but at the same time this medium is immersing in a constant transformation, as most of the major titles continue to provide the guarantee that there are journalists who guarantee the veracity of the news. On the other hand, in Spain, the majority of the population believes that the press, along with radio, continues to be the information media that enjoys the highest level of credibility, and this trust is also transmitted to the advertised messages, because in the case of the written media, the reader can access to the commercial message of different brands through a more leisurely reading, thus achievement and greater attention and assimilation on the part of the reader. And therefore, press advertising also builds brand reputation, which is the main attribute that any comparison have. According to the third wave of 2022 for General Study of Medias, more than 31 million Spaniards listen to the radio regularly, representing 76% of the Spanish population over the age of 14. Three out of 4 Spaniards rely on the radio in their daily lives to stay informed, find out what is happening as it happens, access entertainment programs, or enjoy the best music. According to the European Commission's latest Eurobarometer, radio is the most trusted by Spaniards, making it the most credible medium with 45%, ahead of the written press 37% and television 32%. This is followed by digital media and social networks, which are the least trusted. Secondly, journalistic independence in Spanish is under suspicion because this year, soberly recovered from 2017, some question on the degree of political political and business independence of the media perceived by respondents. The data show an increase in the number of Spaniards who consider that the media are not usually independent from the pressure from politicians. For example, in 2016 was 57%, and now in the last year, in 2022, was 61%. Or from business group that in 17 was 55 and now is 57. And only 30% of Spanish users trust the independence of the media from politicians, and 55% from commercial influences, 5 points less than in 2017. Spain is the second worst European country in terms of public perception of the independence of its media companies from political pressure, only behind Greece, and sharing a place with Italy, and from commercial pressures. Last but not least, social media is treating television lead. After a slight recovery over the past year, television continues its slow but inevitable decline as the source of information most used by the majority of those sovereigns. While in 2014, 84% of internet users had used this medium to stay informed, in 2022 was only 59% used, 5 points less than the last year. Meanwhile, information consumption via social networks remained stable, 56%. As can be seen, only 3 percentage points separate both types of media from leading information consumption. In the case of younger people, social networks have already taken over the most used source of news by 6 out of 10 Spaniards under 45, compared to 4 out of 10 television users. And as a general conclusion, I would say that the phenomenon of fake news and clickbait on social networks affect directly to the Spanish journalist credibility, because nowadays nearly the whole population read news on Google News, and then when you try to find that the same information or the same news in a remarkable or a really main newspaper, you don't find it, or you can find that it's a fake news. And also, the easiest answer is that the Spanish people, we can fail in the fake news, is that the Spanish people we are losing interest in the hard news, in just such as COVID-19 pandemic, and all this come because the Spaniards reach a moment of they don't know in which information they can believe. And if we talk again about this topic, like in 5 years, maybe we can find a country that their news and information will be done by an artificial intelligence. Thank you so much.